the 59th virtual Majlis Al Khonji session. Thank you, Mr. Khalid, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This probably will be one of the most important sessions that we've had in recent times, building upon the particularly successful session from Dr. Abdullah Al-Bahrani. Dr. Abdullah, you'll recall, in January 19th, so recently, talked about the importance of the individual in Oman for personal economic outcomes. He talked about the importance of the citizen and not a paternal state for the future, but a country and economy built on individual endeavors, entrepreneurship. He talked about the role of policymakers, the government, to help us to do business better, and also the importance that we were properly set up in relation to neighboring countries so we don't have disadvantages such as inappropriate alignment of taxes or duties. We're in a good place. The external view of Oman is bright, it's positive. It's exciting under the leadership of His Majesty Sultan Haytham. Oman's geographic location has never been more important than now for the opportunities for the future and the changes coming in supply chain. Our relations with all countries are excellent. So today, with Mr. Khalid Ansari, we have the perspective from the private equity sector. Khalid has tremendous experience in industrial clusters, financial clusters, hospitality clusters, and emerging opportunities. We're going to use the tool of the Oman State Budget 2021, which is pragmatic, carefully thought through, set against the vision of Oman 2040 in the context of the 10th five-year plan. We must do business better. We must be able to scale up enormously. We must communicate to all stakeholders what we are trying to do so that they can participate and align. And in the short term, we have to know how to make up the spending gap. Khalid, it's a privilege and a pleasure you are here. Good luck and welcome to Majlis Al Khonji. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Khalid, for organizing. And I was just checking with Mike before we started. I remember last year when COVID started, you took this initiative to start this Zoom meeting. And Mike's was the first one, and I went on to do the second meeting, and how time has flown. And in between, you had so many Zoom successful meetings. So it's a great effort once again. My talk today is Oman State Budget. Now, I won't go into too much of details of the numbers and the budget, etc., because all of us would have read it, seen it in the papers. So the numbers are known. So I will, use that as a tool to see what are the challenges and what is the way forward for Oman. The budget is there. There's a fifth five-year plan, 10th five-year plan, which takes you to 2025. Then on top of that, there is the Vision 2040. So there's a whole lot of strategies and visions in front of us. The key is that what do we do as businesses and how do we move forward together? So it's a 30-minute presentation. I will keep it crisp and short. But after that, the benefit of it would be to have questions and answers and together look at what are the challenges identified, how do we solve it? So what I would do is start off with a short presentation. If you allow me, give me a second. Okay, I hope all of you can see a slide titled Oman.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So I start off that, and it's set in the context of the 10th five-year plan and Vision 2040. Okay. So let's look at very quickly these numbers all of you know. but I'll highlight a few things as we move along. 2021 budget estimates that we're going to get a revenue of 8.6 billion Omani Riyal, compared to our estimates of 8.4 of 2020. It also estimates and budgets a total expenditure of 10.8 billion Omani Riyal with a deficit forecast of 2.2 billion Omani Riyal, vis-a-vis the 2020 estimates of 4 billion deficit. Now, the key highlight here is the fact that there are new income coming in. So oil revenue, you will see, is being shown as a reduced figure of 3.5 billion as opposed to 4.3. The reason for that is that starting now, a new entity has been created called EDO, Energy Development Oman. And the future, the expenses which were incurred or which had a separate budget allocation for PDO expenditure is now been taken off and will be in the books of EDO. So it's not part of the budget. So that's one significant number which is important. If you look at, the gas revenue is slightly increasing. Taxes have gone up from 1.8 billion to 3 billion, and capital revenue has come down. In terms of expenditure, there has been a cut in the civil ministries from 4.3 to 4 billion. Defense and security expenses from 3 billion to 2.9. Oil and gas is 780 as opposed to 2.4 billion. Now that is where the PDO related expenses has been taken out. Then there's a development expenses of 900 and investment of 1.2 billion and subsidies of 960,000 riyals. So overall, these are the numbers. The only bigger number shift is obviously the treatment of PDO, and some expenses have come in. Now, the budget document recognizes three fundamental challenges which the country faces and the fiscal planners face. One is the lower oil price, high deficit, and public debt. Now, these are the three challenges envisaged, and we'll come back to that as we have a discussion further on. Also in the fiscal plan, which fits in with the the 10th five-year plan and the Vision 2040, are the 5 pillars which have been identified. Now, these are very important and critical one. I'll come back to it at later stages. One is that the plan envisages economic growth. So number one, we've got to have economic growth. Number two is very important, is enhancing efficiency of public financial management. Basically, the costs which are incurred by the ministries and by the bureaucracy and by the government sector is to enhance the efficiency. We're not looking at a reduction there, a slight reduction is there, but it's the efficiency. The word efficiency is very important. With the same resource, we need to do better. The other important one is enhancing the social security net. Now, that's very important for any country and any society, that there always be people who are not so lucky and who are not so privileged and who are in difficulty. Does the society have a social security net to take care of that? That's very important highlights. Obviously, and the fourth one is improving public spending efficiency. So whatever is spent in the public sector, there's got to be an efficiency. And the last one, which is very important, is to revitalize and diversify the sources of government revenue. The word revitalization and diversifications are important here because you can see it fits in with the Vision 2040 and the fiscal plan up to 25. Now, what are the key highlights of the budget? I'll quickly go through the key highlights and then move on to the other issues. One is that we have budgeted at the oil price of $45 per barrel. In 2020, on an average, I think we got $48. Production is, is estimated at 960,000 barrels per day, slightly lower than 2020. So that's number one. So the expectation is that the oil price is not going to go up, but obviously if it goes up, then it favors the deficit shortens. How is the deficit going to be covered? Deficit will be covered by borrowing 1.6 billion and withdrawal of reserves of 0.6 billion. Reserves such as the erstwhile SGRF, now OIA has it. So there's going to be further borrowing and there's going to be drawing on the reserve. Public debt is projected to reach 21.7 billion and 79% of the GDP by the end of 2021. Now that's a very big number. I think Oman has never had a debt of that size. So that's a big challenge facing the economy and everybody. It is also envisaged that the revenue from VAT will be almost 300 million Omani Riyal. Investment income will give 195 million. Excise taxation will raise 20 million and income taxes 50 million. So these are the other sources of revenue collection. Debt service expenses is going to be 1.2 billion Omani Riyal. So, it's a huge number, which again, it's the highest so far. Investment spending is 5.1 billion, which is very good because, despite the challenges, despite the deficit, government is saying we need to continue in spending in investments. So 5.1 billion Riyal has been earmarked for investment, out of which 0.9 billion the government will spend. Oman Investment Authority will spend 2.9 billion, the newly constituted. So there's a lot is going to come out from them, 2.9 billion, which is quite a big number. And the new entity, which is now going to own PDO, is EDO, is 1.3 billion Riyal. Subsidies have been raised to almost 800 million Omani Riyal. So these are some of the main highlights of the budget. Let's look very quickly at the new initiatives. In the budget and during the last year, a number of new initiatives have been, initiated. The major one is that now there's going to be only 2 pension funds in the country. If you remember previously, we had 2, one for civil service, one for government, private sector, then about 7 or 6 for securities, etc. Now everything is going to be merged in 2 big entities. Obviously, there'll be economies of scale, size matters, there'll be rationalization, there'll be efficiency and better utilization. So 2 pension funds. The other one is going to be the minimum year of service has been raised to 30 years. Also, 70% of the government employees who exceed 30 years of service would retire. There is a redirecting of electricity and water subsidy to the vulnerable household. Now, that's very important because the households which have got economic hardship, they will get some subsidy out of electricity and water, which is quite critical. EDO expenses, EDO has been created. The expenses of PDO has been removed from the state budget. Now, the entity itself will have to raise finance and take care of its expenses. Also during the year, this new job security system was introduced with a 10 million Riyal worth of contribution. And further contribution will be that the employees will have to pay 1% of the salary. The insured, which is the company, will pay 1%. And 5% has been added to the fee, which is collected for the renewal of visas for the expat manpower. This was launched in 2020. So far, there has been 2,901 beneficiaries and almost 760,000 has been paid to various beneficiaries. The other new initiative is the 100% excise tax on tobacco and its derivatives, energy drinks, alcoholic beverage, and pork, 50% on carbonated drinks. This has been on for some time, but it's in the budget now fully. The new one is the value-added tax, 5% on goods and services from April 2021. Obviously, there are some exemptions for education and healthcare and some basic commodities. Also, in the budget and the initiative, there is allowances and benefits equalizing for non-basic. So I think various government entities and state-owned enterprises had, all sorts of allowances. Now the government wants to equalize it and make it into a standard format. There are places had X allowance, another had Y allowance, and there was no correlation overall from the economic and the government's point of view. So these are some of the main initiatives. Now, moving forward, I want to highlight certain keywords in the budget 2021. This fits in and dovetail into the next 5-year plan and into the bigger vision of 2040. And there's a typo error there. There is no vision 24. It should read vision 2040. Yeah? So please ignore the first line. Yeah. Vision 2040 is what has been envisaged. So the budget keeps in front the Vision 2040, which is a document most of you know, but I'll quickly go through in the next slide. So the whole plan is trying to fit into that vision. That's number one. So keep that in mind. The other important one is sustainability, fiscal sustainability. The budget and the plan looks at sustainable economy, where the economy should be able to sustain itself. That's an important feature. The third important buzzword, I would say, is the non-oil revenue. Oil revenue has its limitation. It has its ups and downs. It's a commodity. When it was coming at a high rate, it's just a blessing. When it doesn't, it's just difficulty. It's a double-edged sword. So now we have to rely more and more on non-oil revenue as the world economy changes, the dependency on oil changes, etc. So non-oil revenue becomes important. The other important word is optimal level of public spending. It's not talking of a reduction of public spending. It's talking of optimal level. Now, optimal level obviously envisage or takes into account the efficiency element. You could have a high level or a low level, but optimal means whatever is the right and the most efficient way. The next important word is diversified economy. Again, diversification links it with point number 3 on oil. So diversification is a very important feature, diversification away from oil and gas. The sixth one is domestic and foreign investment. These are two important words. Both the government believes and wants that there should be domestic investment from within the country, people who have the capacity, people who have the wealth, people who have the cash to invest in domestic, that's domestic. And at the same time, bring in foreign investment. You see, if you only rely on foreign investment and no domestic, then there's a flight of capital. So to make sure that you attract foreign investment, you've got to make sure there's no flight of capital from the country. So domestic and foreign investments are very important. And the last one, which is very interesting and important, is the private sector. Economic growth, job creation, these 3 words. So the government wants and hopes that the private sector will be responsible or will take an active part in the economic growth of Oman and in the creation of jobs in Oman. So a lot now depends on the private sector. If you look at this, the budget and the 25 and 40, and look at the Oman economy, last 50 years, Oman started off with almost zero, nothing, one school, few tarmac road, etc. Today we are, after 50 years, we've got a fantastic infrastructure. We got world-class airport, first-class roads, first-class seaports, very good and excellent telecommunication. The whole network is now there. Government wants now, and that was the money spent by the government to create this network and the infrastructure. Now is the time for the private sector to take advantage of it. If you look at the airport alone, I understand it can take anywhere between 15 to 20 million passengers. Now, if we don't get that kind of people going through, we're not using that asset properly. If only 5 to 6 million people use the airport, we are underutilizing very good assets. And similarly, there are other examples. If you look at the road all the way to Niswa, which Khalid, you're driving, is a dual carriageway, beautiful road. But if you don't use that infrastructure, if you don't go there and do businesses in the interior using infrastructure, we are underutilizing. And that's what the Vision 2040 said. Look, government is build infrastructure, is world class, Now the private sector needs to take advantage of that and use it. If you look at, with our population of only 4.7 million people, including expatriate, I think it's, the infrastructure can take much more, So I think that's where we need to look at this infrastructure. Just imagine if we had 6 million people living here, the infrastructure will still take care of it and the amount of economic activity it will generate. So that's a very key signs for the future. I will quickly go to the next slide and just list down what are the national priorities in Vision 2040. I won't go through it for the very simple reason the time is short, but it's very clear. The vision is clear. There are 13 national priorities. Yeah, I won't go through all of them, but education, learning is important. Citizen identity is important. Health is there. Private sector is there. Partnership, governance. There's some very interesting and key points have been set out. So that is where the private sector ought to look at. Now, moving on, in the next 5 years, the PPP law was implemented or promulgated during the year. There's an opportunity for private sector using the PPP, the public-private partnership law. It's the law is there, protection is there. Now it's for the private sector to take on and move on. Some of the sectors which have been highlighted in the budget for public-private partnership are seaports, education, environment, transport, healthcare, municipalities, and government services. Now, private sector companies need to look at that and say, where is the opportunity? Where can I add value? Okay. What the government is looking at in next 21 to 25 is a growth, which is a contribution to the GDP. For example, the manufacturing sector, it's saying from 10.8% should be 12.2% of the GDP. Modest increase, but very much doable. Okay, we have fantastic manufacturing base. We've got industrial estate with factories running. All we need is to enhance that and take it into the next level. The next one is logistics. Increase again. Tourism, 2.5 to 3%. Very modest increase, but it's doable. All we need as a private sector to see what is the hindrance, what is stopping it from the growth. Fisheries, 0.9 to 2%, with 2,500 kilometers of coastline. It should be very easily doable. There are countries in this world, like Portugal, similar size as us, facing Atlantic Ocean. We are facing Indian Ocean, Arabian Sea, and Gulf of Oman. We've got a huge coastline. Very easily doable. Mining is modest growth. Education is another area where growth is envisaged. So these are the sectors where the government is looking at PPP and growth. Each one has opportunities. I'm not going to go to each one of it because there's quite a lot of discussion point on that. But it's a pointer to what is possible. The other trend which the government is looking at is the deficit trend. Now, our deficit in 2018 was 2.7 billion. It has grown to 4.2 in 2020. 2020 is a very unusual year because of COVID, etc. So it's a write-off year, I would call it. Going forward, 21 is 2.2, and there is a subsequent reduction in the deficit, heading towards almost a positive or a break-even in 2025. Now, the three underlying features of that, one is that there'll be increase in production of oil, number one. Number two, there'll be an increase in oil prices increases from $45 to $50. And the third is that the recurring costs of the country will maintain and there won't be too many increase. And the fourth element is that the private sector will pull its weight and add to all these 5-6 sectors we talked about, which are critical. The latest reports of Fitch, what do they say? These are the agencies which are looking at Oman from a detached position. They're not emotionally attached like we are. They're saying there's going to be a slow recovery in Oman. The real GDP is 3% in 21, 3.4 in 20. It was in 2020, and will go up to 2.9. Okay. So there is not a big, the forecasters think is not much. They also say that there's going to be a weaker business and consumer sentiment in 21 because we're still recovering from the pandemic, etc. So 2021 is not going to be an easy year. And the fiscal deficit is going to widen from 9% in 2019, going up to 19 and 14 in 21. So these are the forecasts. Now, I've got next 10, 15 minutes to look at what are the challenges. So this is the reality. This is what we're looking at. This is what the government is planning. But what are the challenges? Because the budget is very well thought through. The Vision 40 is very clear that where do we, as a country, Oman wants to go. The 5-year plan up to 25 is clear. But the success of achieving those depends on the economy and what challenges we face. We have a lot of challenges, and some of these challenges can be sorted by individual companies on their own, but there's a lot of collective issues here. And we as business people have to look at all the issues on a collective basis and put our energy to fix those challenges. Based on my experience, these challenges are all very easy to overcome. It just needs the will and the collective effort and timely implementation. Budget deficit is one challenge which we already know. And obviously, the oil price increase which the government is envisaging and the production increase, along with diversification, should take care over a period. The other challenge is the borrowing and the debt service. Now that is something which is heavy on us. We've seen the figures for debt service, we've seen the figure for borrowing. This is going to create challenge of liquidity in the Oman market. We can already see it. There is a liquidity pressure. Interest rates are going up. And this will continue in 2021. Now, this is where businesses and the lenders, the banks, they need to work together as a common stakeholder in the economy to find a solution that how do we deal with liquidity issue? How do we deal with the rising interest cost? Because it's a double-edged sword. Economy is down, businesses volumes are down, yet interest cost is going up. It's not sustainable. So this is where we need to look at from the business's point of view, how do we work? It always reminds me, the banking, when I was a trainee back in UK in 1971, Mike would remember, and some of you who were from UK at that time would remember, Margaret Thatcher had come in, the economy was in shambles, the interest rates were 27%, and there was a joke at that time that about the bankers, and with no disrespect to my banker's friend, the joke was that when it's sunshine, like we are today in the morning, a banker will come with an umbrella. A slight drop of rain, the banker will say, can I have my umbrella back? Now you can't have that attitude. Yeah? So we as an economy needs to work together. Banks are vital. They are similar stakeholders in one. The other challenge is the employment of youth. We know people, students are coming out of the schools, colleges, universities, technical colleges. How do we absorb them? Because you cannot have a society and economy where you just are not able to have employment for youth and high level of unemployment, because that's not good for the morale of the individuals and the amount of money spent by the government to train and educate them. So we need to leverage that. And it's a wealth, it's a resource which has to be used to make sure that they are contributing to the economy and they are able to do jobs. Now, this is where the government expects the private sector to take the lead and create opportunity. Obviously, there are challenges, but those challenges can be overcome. For example, there could be retraining. I don't think there is an overall plan of the output of the graduates and the high school leavers and the technical college leavers. I don't think it's mapped accurately or precisely with the job requirement. So we are producing graduates with good degrees and good academics, but if the market requires another type of skill sets, that is where we need to work on to make sure that they are mapped. There is no harm in anybody who's done a graduation in, say, arts or humanities or history to say, fine, I want to retrain as an accountant. I want to retrain as a banker. I want to retrain as a, investment analyst. You can go on a short courses or long courses and retrain yourself. I think this is what we need to do. The other area where I think we can make sure that we give enough exposure to our youth to train them for the future is, entities like Oman Investment Authority, for example. They invest abroad. They've invested all over the world. We could have a plan that wherever Oman has an investment in any other country, like say Japan, China, or Germany, or India for that matter, in those investments, with a very clear-cut plan, we say that, okay, in that company, every year, 2 to 3 mid-level managers or young graduates will go and work in that country at the cost of those companies to learn. Those sort of schemes, we need to think out of the box. How do we make sure that the workforce is ready? The other important one is the expansion of SME sector. Now that, again, no economy in the world will do well in private sector unless the SME is vibrant and it's the backbone. SME sector is the backbone of most of the economies. Ours is time we rely on SMEs, we encourage those and let them grow. The next one is the cash flow. That we see it every day. There are a lot of cash flow problems in the companies. A lot of monies are owed by the government entities, for example, the ministries. In the budget, it would have been helpful if it was indicated what is the total amount of debt which the ministries have for the local companies, for example, so that one can find a solution. I'm trying to look at that number, but it's not very readily available in the budget document. Is it 2 billion? Is it 3 billion? Is it 5 billion? What does the ministries owe to the private sector entities? Because on the ground, I can see a lot of companies in distress. They go to the banks are tightening the screws all over. There's a lot of unpaid salaries, a lot of unpaid creditors, and that is a challenge which should be easily solvable if all the stakeholders, which is the ministries, the private sector, the banks, and the owners sit together and say, look, let's find a solution. The next one is the poor performance of Muscat securities market. Stock market is the index, is the one major indicator of what the economy is. If you look at our stock market from 2017 to 18, it dropped 15%. 18, 19, it dropped 8%. In 20, it dropped another 8%. So in the last 4 years, we've lost 28% in the index. Now, we need to ask questions. Where are the foreign investors who were there and why have they pulled out? Foreign and domestic. Maybe we go to, using the brokerage and the CMA and the other entities and, go and approach 20 top investors who were there in 2016 and ask them, why did you leave Oman stock market? What do we need to do or what do we need to change to bring you back here? All the companies are undervalued today and yet people are not coming. So that is a challenge we need to work on. Ease of business is another area which needs to be looked at. There's a lot of regulation now, but the ground reality that there could be a lot of difficulties at ground. Now, this is where the private sector and the ministries and the stakeholders need to go to the various entities in the government. See, the government job is to create regulation and monitor it. Private sector's job is to do business. And if there is a bottleneck in the business, we go to the regulator and say, look, help me solve the problem. So I think we need to have a mechanism to escalate the issues. And these are very small issues, which a business face. A business in Brussels may be facing one issue, a business in Salalah Industrial Estate may be facing another, a business in Wadi Kabir will have another issue. So unless we solve the ground level problem, it's going to make life difficult for everybody because these ground level problem creates frustration, creates bankruptcies, creates losses, and then drive people away. The next one is regional geopolitical landscape. I can't say much. I'm not an expert on politics or other thinking. But if there are issues around us, Oman is a very stable country in the middle with no real issues with anybody, its neighbors, etc. But you can't ignore your neighbors. The whole area, the whole Middle East is going through a difficult time. And that is beyond our control. If anything significant happens, anything untoward happens in some country, it's going to affect the region. So, you know, it affects the region, it affects the overall liquidity, it affects the overall rating, etc. And the sad part is that in our region, which, you know, the whole Middle East, and if you take it north of Africa and some parts of, you know, Asia, you know, the last 10 years, we must have burned trillions of dollars on conflicts, which is of no use. Just think if those trillions were invested in infrastructure, you know, everybody will be, you know, laughing. The next one is the economic recovery. Now, from after recovery from COVID, you know, hopefully the vaccine, etc., is coming in. The question is, we don't know whether the curve is going to be V or U, by which I mean it's going to be a rapid increase or it's going to be a slow and gradual increase. So businesses have to be ready with that. If it's rapid, can we take advantage of it? If it's slow and steady, still can we deal with it? And the last is the X factor. You know, COVID has taught us one thing, that no matter how much we plan, how much risk-based analysis we do, something will come and hit us from nowhere. So I call that an X factor. You know, we should be prepared for any eventuality. You know, nobody was safe in COVID. Even the strongest economies in the world, you know, had to bend its knee. So these are some of the challenges for the businesses. I'm slightly running. Give me 2 minutes and I'm done. The last slide is, what is the focus area? Now, focus area for our businesses, I call it the 3 C's. We need to create wealth. There's no other way to grow economy other than to create wealth. How do you create wealth? By production of goods and services. You know, wealth can only come by somebody giving you a grant, or you have to produce something. We depended for 50 years on oil. Now we need to, government wants to diversify and have less dependent. We need to produce wealth. There is no shortcut to production. The more we produce, the better economy we'll have, and more jobs we'll create, and more stability we'll have. There's no shortcut to that. It creates a spending power in people, which in terms, you know, look at, you know, the spending. You know, we as an economy rely heavily on imports. If you look at it, we import food, we import a lot of things from abroad. What do we need to think at? What can we produce here which will substitute imports? As simple as that. You know, food, other items, there are so many good factories. Why can't we increase that and itemize and say, look, this is what I'm going to produce in Oman, not only sell in Oman, but sell in the whole region, including our neighboring countries and the whole region. Because if you look at the logistic positioning of Oman, we are sitting in a nice place. And, you know, if you do a diameter around, you know, 500 kilometers or 500 miles, you've got 1 billion consumers at our doorsteps. You know, what, if we've got the first class infrastructure, why can't we use that and make sure that we produce? That's number one. Number two is the competitiveness. We've got some good industries, but unless we become competitive, you know, there are competition. We cannot ignore the global competition. It's going to get worse. You know, productivity increases what we need to do. If our unit cost of production is higher than anybody else, why would somebody buy ours? Why would even people in Oman buy goods which are expensive if I can import it cheaper? It's as simple as that. So productivity increase is the only solution. And for that, we need to use technology. We've got technologies all over the place. Everybody, all our factories need to look at the new technology and move on. And we need to invest and do a lot of research and development. We've got fantastic facilities in the Research Council, in the Sultan Qaboos University and other universities. Use that. We underutilize and see how do we increase productivity. And the last one is to conserve cash. Conserve cash because cash is critical. As I said, cash is king. So to do that, we need to protect our local industries. If we protect our local industries, cash remains within the country. And if we export, more cash comes into the country. And that is what we need to do. You know, we need to protect local industries the same way, with the same passion we protect our local manpower. You know, there's no difference. You know, we want to make sure that everybody gets employment in Oman. We want to make sure that every industry in Oman is able to survive and make you know, contribution to the economy. It's a tough journey, but doable. There's no rocket science in it. And one thing as a leaving message, I will say, it's a journey we should not be afraid of failure. There will be companies which will go bankrupt. That's fine. It happens everywhere. 10% of the companies in US every year go bankrupt. So it's the largest economy in the world. It learns and moves on. We need not be afraid of failure. If there's a failure, learn from it. I think it's a good thing. It teaches a lot of things. And then we're able to move on because it is part of the evolutionary process. So private sector has got a lot of burden on their shoulder to move on. Thank you very much. Sorry, I overshot by 5 minutes, but there we are. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khalid. Mr. Mike, over to you, please.
Thank you, Reham. Thank you, Khalid. Very concise, clear, and builds upon earlier presentations extremely well. So I have a question I'd like to ask you to comment on, please. I'm coming from the direction that listening to you and from the notes that I've made, consistently, the presenters that come to Majlis Al Khonji conclude and say clearly, the economic theory for Oman is sound. The 2040 vision is relevant and appropriate. And what you've just been talking about in outlining the Oman Budget 2021, it's pretty good. It's understood. So I want to drill in now. It's time. We've had plenty of presentations. We know the landscape very well. We're now almost into month 2 of 2021. February is 2 days away. First point. Now, we need to examine and interrogate in the same way as I am interrogated as a CEO of an enterprise, but it's time to interrogate the performance of the big players, the policymakers, the regulators. We listened to Dr. Abdullah Barani talk about we need evidence of success from policy. We need to see process-driven actions that can be measured. We need to see data that can be interrogated. For me, we're coming to the end of this beautiful weekend. The sea was flat calm. Oman's temperature was perfect. How many visitors came from the UAE this weekend? How much money was spent in Oman? Who stopped them? Was it the COVID? They're not coming because of social gathering? Or was it they can't come here because it's too difficult to access Oman? First point. Second, in a question, I asked someone from Port of Sohar 3 days ago, how did 2020 go? He said, Mike, tonnage is increasing exponentially. I said, oh, why? Where is the business coming from? Where is it going to? Is it tonnage going out? Is it tonnage coming in? How do we do more? So my question, my comment to you, please, Khalid, if I may, is just give us some thoughts on the time now, the performance of the policymakers. How should they be accountable? How should they be measured? How do they partner? How do we work together? Because month 2 starts in 2 days' time. Then we'll be talking about 2022 budget, and this one's forgotten. If I could ask you, please, for some comments.
Thank you. Just to, for the performance, etc., I think if you remember, there was an initiative called Tanfeed. Tanfeed had set certain KPIs. If you just follow that KPIs and monitor it, we will know what the performance is. Because I think it had set performance for each ministries. I think, people are just not following up, but there's no reporting on it. That's number one. Number two, when you look at, when you give an example of, tourism, for example. Now, Oman is absolutely clear. So I've seen so many studies done by various consultants. It's very clear that it's a destination where a lot of people would like to come. Okay, airport can take about 20 million people. If we get 5 to 6 million people coming into Oman and spend $2,000, you're looking at a staggering, 20 billion contribution. Yeah, it's common sense. What we need to look at, okay, leaving COVID aside, if there was no COVID, and I was telling my wife this morning, brilliant weather today. If there was no COVID, there would be a lot of visitors in Oman. Leaving that aside, is the bottlenecks. We need to look at the details where the problems are. The policies are there. You can always improve in policy, but by and large, I think the policy works. The problem is in the implementation, the bottleneck. There was a Chinese visitor who had come last month, a business visitor. And I asked them, why are you not coming? I see you all over the place in Dubai, I see you all over the place in UK. You go to any shopping mall in UK, it's all Chinese. Why don't you come to Oman? What they said? They said, very difficult to complete the online process and fill in the form, okay? Because they say Chinese don't know foreign language and they're very afraid of using foreign language. So, they would rather, when they go to an online form, it's in English or Arabic, this was too difficult, so they just drop it. That is one very simple example. That bottleneck, one needs to see, get a feedback where the problem is, and feed it into the authorities and fix it. You can use the Chinese embassy to solve all the problem, or you can authorize some travel agents who brings in people. That is one simple example. So it's all about implementation and communicating those, bottlenecks. I think it can be done very quickly. It doesn't take too long. It's just maybe the people who are implementing is not even aware that this is a problem. I got to know it through feedback. So I can give you countless examples. So my comment is the policies are there, procedures are there. It's the implementation. We need to make sure that we implement it and implement it quick. That's it. I give you a personal example. I used to study in a boarding school, about 50 years ago or more than that. In 2019, we are still a group of 30 odd friends from the old school days. We meet everywhere. So, when Oman opened up, I give them an example that, look, Oman, you can get visas, come. So 2019, October, all of us decided that Muscat will be the venue for the get-together. We booked a hotel, everything was fine. Now, a lot of those people are from, Asian countries, and some of them, in fact, all of them are originally from Asian countries. Bangladesh, for example, this is where I was, and some have moved to Pakistan after the fall of 31. And a lot have gone to UK and America, they're American passport. So primarily Bangladeshi. All those people who were Bangladeshi origin with American passport got the visa on arrival. Okay. Others, where I applied, got rejected. Because of nationality, obviously. Yeah? And if you look at the profile of these people, some of them are MD of a bank or a chairman of a bank, etc. But it was rejected outright because the system was blocked because of the people from Bangladesh who were coming in and probably overstaying and not paying. So those sort of things. So the problem got solved. I went to the right person, spoke to them, and within 10 minutes the visas were issued. So, this is a practical problem. I knew the people, I was in the country, so I was able to solve it. Somebody outside the country will not be able to fix it. And that will put off people. I think, it's the nitty-gritty which is an issue. I hope it clarifies.
You do, and I'm sure others will build upon what you're saying. Reham, thank you, Khalid. Reham, could I hand over to you for the next questioner, please?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. We have the next question from Mr. Muhammad Habib and then Mr. Tim. Please go ahead, Mr. Muhammad. Yeah,
Unmute. You're unmute, please. Mohammed, can't hear you. You need to perhaps unmute. Mohammed, can't hear you.
Yeah, you need to unmute, Mr. Mohammed.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, Khalid, thank you very much for such a bright budget picture you're presenting. I'm just going back to you in 2019 when you, at the end, you presented it a budget which was very bleak, and I remember got into an argument with you, where we were concentrating only on revenue increase without looking at the expenditure. It was zero discussion on expenditure. Now I can see this budget. Somebody has, congratulations for the team of His Majesty and His Majesty to take a bold decision to reduce the expenditure tremendously by 19% to bring the deficit to 2.2 billion, comparing and when the income is decreased by 19%. So the problem was in expenditure. That's one. So if you look at the budget, this is quite bright and quite hopeful. Now, coming back to the deficit you mentioned, we have a small economy. Now, the deficit can just be wiped out very easily from the current budget. We budgeted at $45, and we are now already in January in 50s. Now, if you take the total revenue, oil revenue, and just average it by $65 per barrel, we are wiping out the budget deficit straight away. Now, coming to the 2021 and the forecast, where we are got the vaccine and the economy is going to pick up compared to 2020, business going online, it won't be very difficult to wipe out that deficit. So that's one. And that's if you look at it, we need to really concentrate and project such things to the investors. So our economy is small, and it's small. This looks big deficit, but it's very small to wipe it out. Now, coming back to your borrowing. Now, if you look at the economies of the world, the countries who had the similar problems, they took a decision. They say, hey, we got so many assets. We are not business people. Large assets. Let the private sector run them and be more efficient. And we wipe out our borrowing problems. And so that is another way. I'm sure the government is looking into it, but it's such a short time. They've done a very good job to reduce the deficit and control the income. So that's on borrowing. And on cash flow, again, this will solve by looking at the assets, what we have, and how can we transfer it to the public sector who can run it, or the private sector who can run it much more efficiently. So, and then coming to the tourism, as Mike mentioned as well, and Khalid, we have a beautiful country to serve. If you look around it, and we have, as Khalid said, we have 1.2 billion people around it who would love to come and see and visit Oman. Now, we really need to market that. And there are many companies who would love to come in and set up big hotel and resorts if we make them available to them. And there's a huge income for the government as far as the leasing such lands and on the seafront, leasing them in the mountains, leasing them in the desert. And you don't have to go very far. You have within the regions, in our region, who have lots of money to invest in this sector, because this is so I see the decisions being taken recently, bold decisions, and we must salute them, whoever who are the team behind it. It's going to really change the picture of Oman as it is now, but it's not been projected to them yet properly. So these are the main things I just wanted to bring in to just put some more bright lights to what you have presented. And I hope that this will be projected to the international investors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Very useful. I think you've said it much better than what I would have said about selling Oman. Two things. In expenses, cutting expenses is one part of the equation. It's always good to cut expense, but my view is that if you have an expense and if it is going to cause a social issue, then look at the first option. If you have people, why not use them? So let's say there's a company or there's a ministry, it has got, you say that it required 100 people and you got 150. my view is that why can't we use that 50 effectively? If those extra 50 use 8 hours a day to do something constructive, look at the economy benefit. You need to use the resources. People are resources. We need to use them. If you employ and don't use them, then it's the fault of the owner of the company and the department concerned. So people are resources. China has got 1 billion plus people. They're making good use of those people, isn't it? And, and they're going to be number one economy in the world in a few years' time. Instead of creating it a liability, they said, let's use it. The second largest the population in the world is India. They've got liability of people. They don't know how to use all of them. Okay? So, look at the two differences. Both billion plus people. One is in a different space, and the other one is different. So that's number one. So we have people, and if you look at Oman, our population is small, 4.5 million, including expatriate. It's a very small size of the population. And the land is big with a lot of resources. So this place can be a land of honey and milk, if you want. But, that is where my view is that now the government is saying, look, we got a plan, we put the infrastructure, you, the private sector, take it to the next level. It's our responsibility, the private sector, to do that. And if you do it collectively, I think it can be done. We don't need to import a consultant or an expert from some other country to come and tell us. We've got enough manpower, enough experienced people, enough educated people in the country. We all put our heads together, we find our own solution. It's all looking up the way I look at it. We just need to get our heads together.
Exactly.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thanks. Now, just one more point I missed out is the employment, employing the here, and your point on employment. Now, if you look at it, maximum I can think it could be it could reach to 150,000. Now, currently, we have about over 100,000 companies.
True.
If one company employs one, that solves a lot of problem. So it's the management of why are the companies who are here available, small companies who are making a lot of money, to be honest, and otherwise they will not be here. They are all expatriates. They will not be told to at least employ one person. It will take away big unemployment here. So it's the regulation, it's the like the German did it, is to look deeply into it and see how can we solve it, not just solve it by imposing on people, but that will solve. Let's look at the statistics. We have a lot of data. How many people are paying into the Parsi? How many companies? You will see a very small companies are paying to the Parsi. So this means the large amount of companies are not employing any Omanis. And those are the people should be targeted. Hey, listen, you are a small company, of course, but your turnover is very high. They can get it. We have all the data, how much they're selling through the bank, So that's one of the areas. There are many ways of solving the employment problem here. But somebody has to go and look at the data. We have a bank of data here around it. So I just recommend that, okay, look at the companies who are not employing anybody.
Could I add to what you're saying?
Yeah.
I would look at it differently.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that, look, I've got 150,000 people and I've got 100,000 companies, I give one each. No, I wouldn't do that. Yeah?
Yeah.
I would do it the other way. What are the requirements of these companies? And I will train those people and make them available in the market. Those companies will employ automatically. You're an accountant, I'm an accountant, we are from the same profession. 2,500 foreign accountants are in Oman. And when I was in KPMG, I would cry out, come and join, become an ACCA. Not many people are coming. Now, this is the time, hundreds of SQU graduates, bring them on board, make them chartered accountant, and automatically they'll have a job. So that's the way I look at it. You need to create that, opportunity. It's not by imposing. Business people look at it, some people look at a very short-term view, some take a long-term view. On a short-term view, they look at a cost and the bottom line. So imposing is one way, but I'm saying is to create a pool of people who are highly equipped, highly talented. Who's going to refuse them? That's the way I look at it. There are huge opportunities.
Yeah, you're looking at the management.
Manpower is a good resource. We need to use the manpower very effectively. To create value. Just add one more thing. During this lockdown, a lot of companies, I know a lot of companies within our group also, they had people sitting at home. So I was telling the CEOs of those companies, do two things. One, if somebody cannot work remotely, give him or her a chance to learn new skills. This is the time. You're sitting at home. Instead of waiting for offices to open, learn new skills. Online, take a diploma, develop new set of skills so that when you come out after the lockdown, you're not only a bookkeeper, but you become an actuary also, or you become an insurance person also. That's number one. The other I was saying is to incentivize people, and start doing online media-based selling of products. They can sit at home because there's a problem, we can't come out, but what is there to incentivize and say, look, you're getting a basic salary. If you sell X amount of my product, you get an extra that. That is the way to look at it. So the wealth is created by production. We need to work, as simple as that. If you work, wealth will be produced. Okay, we may not succeed, there will be failure, but you get up again and start running again. By third time, we will be lucky. That's the nature, law of nature.
I agree with you. Now, you were looking at the management side, but in the lower side, I think looking at the environment previously, all the mentality was that we should still be on the breast of the government. Now, this government has taken a decision. Hey, enough. You're gone. So you can see you probably see in your office how people are really trying to come and work and so on and so. So if they keep this momentum going, and also as you said, the incentives are there. Some of the jobs, I don't know, mentally they're thinking they should not be doing, like in the hotels, like in the restaurants, and that is a lot of incentives there because people pay not only salary. The salary is quite good here, but they have lots of tips. So somebody has to bring those things out to them, and I'm sure Omanis are working on Friday and the taxes and this. So they should be able to work on those. Those incentives are there. They just needs to be visible. The visibility of not there. A lot of jobs that's got lots of incentives, but the visibility is not there.
Yeah.
So I agree with you.
Excellent point. Khalid, if we can move on to Mr. Simon, please. Thank you for your contribution. Over to you, Mr. Simon. You're on mute at the moment.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yes.
Are you in Salalah?
Mike, can you hear me? Yes.
How are you? Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to make some comments. First of all, thank you, Khalid. Let me express my joy and happiness that we talked about certain things that we are not talking about frequently, which is the vocabulary, the key words. You see, we feel that, and the Professor Abdullah, sorry, we have always to refer to him because he's proved he's an authority, not only on macro, but also localizing the knowledge. We think we are not educated economically. Myself, I must admit my ignorance now straight away. We have to have programs to understand the meaning of every word, of GDP, of KPIs, of diversified economy, what is foreign investment. We have to talk about these things because I think the key word for this renewed renaissance is economy. We're shifting into economy. That's the first thing. So we would like to see programs to educate us, particularly myself, on the words. The secondly, you talked about the role of the private sector. Not you, also the vision 2040, extremely important role. Where is to take the task will be on our shoulders. We need a strong chamber of commerce and industry. We need many things because otherwise the private sector is a combination of individuals. Thirdly, we talk about local and foreign investment, which means dealing with expatriates. Are we reconciled within ourselves as Omani with our relationship to expatriates? Do we really accept them and welcome them? Because, as I learned, foreign investment comes where it's welcome. It flows where it's welcome. It does not necessarily flow where it makes more money. So are we sure, we are convinced, and we know the impact of and the presence of an expatriate in our country? This is, I think, very important to reconcile within ourselves. And finally, of course, we can talk hours of this. Before, I would have thought that before introducing new taxes, are we sure that we're collecting the already taxes in place, particularly the corporate tax? And why only a very, very few minority pay tax, whilst we have 311,000 companies registered in the country? Well, I'll limit myself to that. And thank you, Khalid, once more. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Shimon. And I won't go through all what you've said. I think you present differently. As somebody like yourself, you need these numbers, and you know all what it means. Just two things I will say. Private sector is in now the government. The mindset change. We should recognize there is a new world order everywhere. Things are changing. Okay, so we need to recognize that we can no longer rely on government support, government initiated projects, and government direction. Government is saying, "I've built everything for you. Now you private sector take and run. If there's a problem, there is a mechanism. There's a ministry. There's a chamber of commerce where all of us are members. There are association, there's a contractors association, Opal association. We use those channels to go and present a problem and seek solution. So I think we need to move on in that government is a regulator, let them regulate. We need to generate income ourselves. Okay, so that mindset change has to come. That the new world order is changing. Things have changed a lot, and we need to even be protected. There was a time when everybody's talking of globalization, open up the economy, let people bring in goods and dump. I think sometimes we have to look at our own interest. If it is going to destroy the local jobs, the local industry, we need to have some protection. There are much bigger economies who produce and come and dump and destroy industry. So we have to look at everything with one objective, that our economy has to move forward and the welfare of the people are important. How do you position it? It's not relevant that much. When you talk of, when Hassan was talking about, or Mohammed was talking about, the Omanization, etc., that's a reality. One has to recognize that the country and the jobs have to be first given or done by the people of the country. The expatriates are just visitors, a guest here. Yeah. If I bring an investment, I make money, and then I make money and stay. I like the country. If I don't like, I leave after some time. So I think the ground reality is very clear. The question is, how do you communicate it? And that is where I say the role of the newspapers, etc., is also important. There are numerous times you pick up a newspaper, an English newspaper, you see on the left side, 100 million investment for project X. And on the right side, you give 10,000 people given marching orders. Now, both are reality. My only question is that 10,000 people giving marching orders should be on page number 5, not on page number 1. Because, when you produce that on both the same page, a foreign investor will forget about 100 million, will only look at the right side of the story. Yeah. So it's how you project news, how you sell the country, how we sell the opportunity. It's very untapped. There's so much opportunities. Whoever visitors who have come and visited me in my personal capacity or as a company, not a single one goes back and says, look, there's no opportunity here. So doesn't that tell us something? It's just for the private sector. Now the government is saying, you, the private sector, you run the battle. In the steeple or the relay race, the battle is now in the hand of the private sector. We need to run it. And we can run it if all of us work together, all the stakeholders work together. It's as simple as that. It's not rocket science at all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khalid. Thank you, Mr. Simon. We'll move to the next question from Mr. Tim. Please go ahead.
Hi, Khalid, thank you. Excellent presentation. I really enjoyed that. My question is a very simple one. You touched upon cash flow and sort of unpaid salaries and things like that. Do you think the government is doing enough to ease up cash flow? Because, you know, one of the things I find a lot is that there's still a lot of unpaid government bills and things like that that's not happening. And I don't know whether, you know, there's taxation and things coming in like that, which is great to generate revenue for the government. But are they putting enough cash into the economy by paying their debts on time and not strapping the private sector? That's basically what.
Thank you. If you look at, I was trying to look at in the budget, what is the local debt? You know, there is a figure of debt from the lenders, but there's also a local debt. And that by local debt, I mean the amount of money which the government and the ministries and the state-owned enterprises pay to the local contractors and the local businessmen. I think that figure is still not known or not disclosed yet, but I assume it must be quite substantial. And I agree that we need to look at that number and find a solution to that, because a large organization can go to the bank and roll over their funding, but you know, the real problem is the medium and small enterprises. You know, they are the bigger problem, because without, you know, if there's a large contractor which doesn't get paid, bank is willing to be more accommodative to that contractor to keep his commitments going and ensure that he doesn't default, because there is inherent risk that if a big contractor defaults, it affects all the banking system. Okay, but that large contractor is not paying his subcontractor, and that subcontractor is not paying his subcontractor, and that the third or the fourth level subcontractor, which happens to be a young Omani SME, is suffering. And that is not being addressed. And I think that has to be looked at, because if you don't affect that person, an SME who started a business 2 years ago, he's got no credit line. Nobody's willing to lend him. You know, all he has is 100,000 he received from Al Raft fund and from an SME fund. Now, if the fund dries up, unless he has a rich uncle or a father or relatives to support him, he's in a difficult situation. And I see a lot of them in the market. And unfortunately, you know, if the credit line and the liquidity is not solved, we will see more bankruptcies and liquidations. That's the ground reality. So that needs to be addressed. You know, if we know that the amount is, you know, $1 billion or 2 billion, you know, maybe we can think of a product by such as issuing a promissory note. A government issues a promissory note to a contractor, who in turn can use that note to leverage it and create liquidity in the market. You see, that's the problem. So that is one area which is not being looked at with a lot of detail. On a global basis, yes, they're looking at it, but if you go to the nitty-gritty, you know, a lot of the voices are not heard. Secondly, we can look at you know, issues such as you know, in the COVID, if you look at, the central bank gave a relief up to end of March for repayment of loan, etc. The question is, what will happen in March? You know, position has not changed for too many people. Is the relief going to be extended further? Number one. Number two, there is a question of security of those funding. You know, a typical banking loan is against the security of either land, building, or your inventory, or your contracts. Now, that's the security given. If the value of those securities are diminishing, then there's a margin call. So the company is in a very tight position. To give you an example, if I borrow $1 million and I say and I've mortgaged my house, which is worth 2 million riyal, because that's the ratio the bank is saying. So the bank is comfortable that I've given, I've got a mortgage of this house 2 million riyal, I've given 1 million riyal. And as long as I pay my interest out of my rent, etc., the bank is okay. The problem comes in this market today. If the value of my property drops from 2 million to 1.5 million, then there's a margin call on my loan. The bank turns around and says, I can't lend you 1 million, you've crossed the limit, you have to pay me back. So what do I do as a borrower? I go to the market and try to sell. Now, if I go and force sell, I drop the price further. Okay? If I am an isolated case, it doesn't really matter. But if there are 1,000 people like me, you drop the market value of my security. So it's just, it's a spiral downwards trend, which will not help anybody in the long run. If you are in a situation like that, we need to look at it, a bigger picture, and say, how do we help a borrower in this time of a need? Perhaps the solution is to say, fine, for the purpose of my security, I will freeze the value at 1st of January 2020, even though the real value is dropping. But for the purpose of calculation my margin call, I'll freeze it at that level. Same thing, I will do it for my stock, which I have invested in, because the stock market is dropping, 28% drop. So I think these are the sort of things we need to look at to support. And it's not unheard of. You take Japan, for example, those of you who remember, Japan had a huge crisis about 15 years ago or more on the real estate. And the Japanese central bank put in a check and balance that, look, we will not allow the prices to fall. And they put a ceiling on it. And they saved the economy. Yeah? So I think there are challenges, but there are ways also. We need to put everything on the table with all the stakeholders, in this case, a borrower, the lender, the regulator, and the government, and say, look, let's find a solution. There is a problem, but there's always a solution to a problem. Sometimes you have to take a bitter pill, but that is better to take a bitter pill now than go for a liquidation 3 years later. I hope I answered your question.
Yep, thank you very much, Khalid. That's a very, very comprehensive answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khalid. We'll take the next comment or question from Mr. Warif. Would you like to add your comment on the
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, Khalid always give us very inspirational talks, and we get pretty excited here when he talks about it, what challenges we're taking, etc. But it always comes back is to the government policies and how can the government really engage us as a private sector around the table. For example, recently we've heard that thousands of jobs are going to be rolled out and people will secure those jobs. In reality, all the downstream stakeholders have not really been engaged as much. And I think clearly, Khalid, you said it, is that if you train the people with the right skills, people will be willingly go and pick the skills up. And today, I think last week or so, it was announced that there's so many thousand jobs will be available 2021. I'm not so sure how much engagement that has taken place, or somebody has just decided that we're going to employ these guys and just go into the market, and people in the market will just take them on. If you don't have the right skills, you're going to land up in the same problems before, because basically it doesn't fit. And then there's frustration on the employees, there's a frustration on the employers, etc., etc. We seem to not really get the handle of this employment matter. We all agree around the table that there's a lot of Omanis quite talented and they can actually do a lot of jobs. But there's a mismatch of what the government is pushing and what the private sector can pick up. So I just wanted to think about basically today, what do we do differently? We've talked about this in the last 10 years. We're still talking about now. And Mike has said, we're in the second month of 2021. We all want to change the fiscal balance. We're ready, but is somebody talking to us?
Yep. Thank you, Warren. I would say, if you look at the Vision 2040, the 5-year up to 25, the message is loud and clear. We want private sector to grow the economy and create employment. Message is clear. So the government has made it clear, look, private sector, 50 years, we were leading, we were building, now we got all the infrastructure ready, now it's your turn to run it. So that's number one. So private sector, instead of waiting for the government to come back and tell us, oh, you do this, you do that, or send a labor inspector and say, look, 2 people you have to employ, otherwise I will not give you a clearance. I think those days are gone. I think as a private sector leader, you need to go back to the government and say, look, this is my requirement. This is I need to help. How can you help? And how can we work together? So you go with a solution. I think let's not look at the government to give us a solution. Government is saying, look, this is our vision. You are empowered as a private sector to create opportunities and jobs. You do it. So that mindset change has to come. For example, if I have a problem, I escalate it, I go to the right people, talk to them and get a plan accepted. It's as simple as that. Why wait for somebody to come and tell me?
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I hope it's. And what is you got a nice training place, you got to have thousands of people in there sitting there, no, to train.
And that's exactly the case. If you remember, Khalid, we had.
I've been to your center. Don't rely on government. You go out and say, look, anybody who hasn't got a job, come to me. I'll train you. I'll equip you, an accountant, insurance salesmen, car salesmen, vendor. I will do the training. And your training is good. I've seen it. Yeah. So do it.
So I think, Khalid, one experience is that, as you remember, we talked about the accountants. Thousands of accountants need jobs and skills. We did the first few batches, but that's dried out. Why? Because there were no takers. So I think this is where the challenge is. And if we actually work together as the private sector and the government, saying, hey guys, these are the gaps. How do we fill the gaps? What skills needs to be done? And then we're all running on the same sort of page. It's a lot easier than you're doing something and then there's no fit somewhere. So I think we need to get that alignment with the government in terms of policy making.
So now the government is saying, here's my vision up to 25, my plan, and 2040. We give you full authority. We got a law, PPP law, we got a law of investment, we got a law of foreign investment. You get on with it. Yeah? So government is giving it to you. We just
I agree with you. So let us do something about it. Okay, great.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warid. Khalid. We'll move to the next questions. His Excellency Khamis and then Mr. Aluk. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Mr. Khalid. Very, very much. Thank you. I always refer to you when I need some advice.
You're always welcome. You
are really today put it in a very nice way. I have a few comments and then I will have my question. First of all, my comment, I agree totally with you that a lot of investment have been done in the country, and we have state-of-art education system, health, and airports, and roads, and port, which put us in the platform that is a time to move further. And then we have seen, alhamdulillah, with the new His Majesty Haytham, we have seen a lot of efficiency movement in the term of government, and also government companies and government bodies, which this will lead to better performance very soon. However, we'll have the impact of what's so-called COVID-19 for 2020 and 2021. You have elaborated a little bit in that, in the last statement, and you say that if we want to be involved as a stakeholder all together, then we should have a way to solve a matter of the evaluation of the asset and take January 2020 as a basic of evaluation to avoid more and more collateral will be needed by the banks. So in this way, will we protect the companies and the asset of the country and also protect the banks? What I want from you to elaborate more on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Khamis. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. On this particular point, what I'm saying is that, you know, in Oman, all the accounting and the financial statements are required to be prepared by a royal decree which was issued in 1989, if I'm not mistaken, which says that the Oman companies must comply with international accounting standards. It was a very wise decision because each country has its own accounting standard. For example, if you go to UK, UK has their own accounting standard, French have got their own, India has got its own, and US has got its own. So Oman said, our economy is not big enough, we'll follow international accounting standard. Now, international accounting standard, first of all, is a policy framework. Okay? So it sets out certain specific requirement for valuation of assets. For example, assets could be your land and building, your plant and machinery, or your stocks. Now, some companies have chosen to value those items on the market basis against which they're borrowing. So obviously, if the market drops, in their books, that value drops. And in the books of the bank, also the value drops. What I'm saying is that for the purpose of preparing accounts, you can still follow that policy, you know, so that you comply with international requirement. But for the purpose, for the bank to calculate the margin by virtue of the regulator, like central bank saying, because of this unforeseen circumstances resulting from COVID, we will freeze the value of certain things like the land and the building and the inventory as of 1st of January 2020. Now, that is nothing wrong, you know, with that, because we are trying to protect our economy. You know, the accounting standards are done for, you know, it's a man-made standard. It's not a revelation from the top that we cannot change, you know. We can always modify it, but why wait till that time? Because modifying those takes a long time. And you know, as an accountant, and you know, people who are accountant here would know these standards every 4 or 5 years, we change it anyway. So I'm saying we have to protect our economy and our companies. And by simple measure, by a regulator issuing a circular saying for the purpose of this is what we will do. And you know, it should solve the problem. It will take away the pressure from the banks to make provision, because you know this, if you don't do that, it has a spiral downward impact. You are forced to sell property in the market or the stock, it goes down. You lose money. The other party is also borrower. They are forced to, it keeps going down and down and down. And who loses in the end? The economy loses and the borrower loses. Yeah? So we need to look at the total picture. You know, banks in isolation is not the only one who should look. We should look at it as an economy, you know. And this is what I was trying to say, that we need sometimes an intervention from a regulator to guide us to that. So it helps us. You know, the idea at the end of the day is that it's going to be a tough time. Yeah? So in that tough time, we need all help. And this is a help which doesn't take long, you know, like the help of extending the loan, you know, to for a period, you know, fine, it was a circular, we got it extended. So these sort of little things, there are numerous little issues in the economy or with the companies, which can be fixed by working together for the benefit of the businesses. I just take the discussion a little bit to give you another example, you know, apart from this accounting. You know, there is a company which we have investment in. A first-class production house produces an X item. A similar product is produced in another country, in GCC, for example. Okay. Now, when we sell our product to that country, you know, there are 30 requirements, for example. Okay. When a similar company in that country sells product to Oman, we got 15 requirements. Okay. Now that is a practical problem, isn't it? That I have to deal with 30 requirements and I'm going to take another 6 months to comply with that, whereas another company from outside is coming and taking away my business only because of this procedural problem. So that we need to take it to the right authority and say, look, I need a protection. I need to save my, the company which is a good producer of goods and services. It employs thousands of people. So these are little things which are there. The overall vision is very clear. The roadmap, I think, is very clear. Private sector to lead it. But when, as they say, the devil is in the detail. When we go to implement it, there will always be an implementation issue. And as a business people, we need to get together, go to the right forum, be it Chamber of Commerce, be it Ministry of Commerce, be it Ministry of Taxation, and take it up and fix it. That's, I hope it's clear.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll take the next question from Mr. Alok. Please go ahead. And then Madam Hana Amin.
Well, Mr. Khalid, thank you so much. And again, cohesive, lucid, perfect. Just wanted to have a quick word on where I pick up from Mr. Mike and Mr. Timothy. I must say that, we are into the manufacturing sector and the government is wanting the private sector to be strengthened, to be becoming better, to have a more stake, be empowered. All that is absolutely perfect. And we want to do that as well. The only thing is what comes to my mind is there are some immediate requirements on the challenges aspects. One is that the companies have been largely, if I say a little, a difficult word, they have been largely into the ICU since last 1 year. Another 6 months of COVID not going away will be difficult again. The most important, in my view, would be to ease the cash flow situation in the market. That's one. Second, we find that there are draconian tightening on the banks. There has to be a balance there wherein the companies owe debt, they get paid for it, they get a 1 million real incoming. Should not be that the first shot, the 1 million goes back to the bank and they are left high and dry. They can't work on their working capital requirements. So this is another one. And one aspect which I heard from Mr. Warid was on the labor aspects. I think I've been part of many forums and I personally feel that as far as the labor is concerned, it is high time that we stop micromanaging it. The only thing that is required for hiring local talent is, if in case there is a misfit, there should be an ease of easing out. Otherwise, there can be a quota, there can be a requirement. The only thing is that if you find that the person has not been to the skill set that you require, could be that you can repurpose, reorient, and or can ease out to the industry as well, and you can get into another sector. So this is one thing which is very, very important, not to micromanage on labor. That will really empower the private sector. I just wanted to know your take on that, right from the bank support to the cash flow easing being a very, very high requirement of the market as of now, and then ease of doing business in terms of ease of hiring and also probably easing out. Therefore, managing quality, retention, hiring, productivity, all that, competitiveness, as you said, all is so layered and interconnected. It's extremely important to look at very, very cardinal issue of managing people. Over to you, Mr. Khalid. What is your take on it?
First of the banks. Banks are a stakeholder in the economy. So they have to work together with the business. There's no other way. Banks, if they take a very different approach of a very risk mitigation and hands-off approach, will not help. Banks are integral part of the economy. If you look at the banks, they take deposit from people here. They take deposit from all the pension funds. Pension fund money belongs to the citizens of the country. So effectively, they're borrowing from the citizen in a way and lending it to the citizens' company also. So banks are very much critical. My view would be that the banks have to play the role positively and effectively. To have an ostrich-like approach will not solve the problem. I give you an example. When there's a sunshine, I give you an umbrella. When there's one drop of rain, I want the umbrella back. It will not work. You have to look at the problem, come up with a solution.
Absolutely.
Just by, selling my risk is not allowing my this. No. You look at a company, okay, fine, company has a problem. If they identify the root cause of the problem, then it can be fixed. So they cannot treat all companies in one brush. Each company will have its own problem. Some companies will have a genuine problem, receivable for the ministry. You look at it differently. Some company will have a problem of, COVID closure, like the hotels and all that. You look at it differently because the business is dried up. Hotel occupancy is down to 10%. You got to look at it differently. Some companies have a different type of problem in terms of, the market competition, the growth, etc. You got to look at it differently. Then there are some companies who misuse the funds. They borrow from the bank and divert it somewhere else. You got to look at it differently. So everybody cannot be in one screen. So banks are active. Banks have got a lot of qualified, good people. They need to roll up the sleeves, go to the companies, sit there and find out what the real problem is, rather than sit in the head office or in a coffee shop and take a decision.
That's missing.
Go to the company and see what are they producing. There are some brilliant companies producing, great products, but because of COVID, there's a problem. How do we solve the problem? So that's number one. The banks are part and parcel of it. Micromanagement, I agree. Now, if you look at government is saying, look, private sector run it. If a department is micromanaging, I think that's not correct. My view would be you go back to that department, be it a labor department or any other, and say, look, you don't micromanage my business. I know how to run a business. Let's sit down together. What is your objective? And let's marry it with my objective and find a solution. That's the way I look at it, and the third one was on the, what was your third point?
The cash flow and the government impetus right away to ease the local debt. That's very good.
Is absolutely fundamental that liquidity in the market should be there. If I talk to some ministry, they say there is no problem. If I talk to some, there's a problem. I think let's put the table, all the issues on the table. If there is an X amount payable, out of which maybe 20% are dispute, put that on one side, resolve the dispute. But 80% which is good and payable for work done, I think you work out a plan. If I don't have a cash, you go back to the company and say, look, I don't have a cash, I'm willing to be a promissory note, or let's work out a documented repayment plan, which I can take it to the bank and the bank will match it. So we need to talk. I think communication is the key word. We need to just 3 words. I had 3 C's in the end. Now I would say there's another C. And those 3 communicate and communicate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khalid, Mr. Aluk. We'll take the next question from Madam Hana and then Mr. Haji Adam.
Right, okay. Please, Madam.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much for excellent really presentation. We enjoy so much. I would like really to more comment, and really I was very interested in the comment raised by Mike. Like now it is we will start the second month. We would like to know what happened for the 2040. And as you say, there is policy and important the implementation, but how we measure the implementation? So we need a list of indicators. I think it should be maybe on annual or monthly basis. And this indicator should be well known to people who are implementing this 2040. And then it should be there an accountability. Did they achieve this goal or not? The 2040 has 70 goals. And there is target goals, which is the rank for in the international report in 2030 and in 2030. I would give an example. In the innovation report, the 2040 say that we should be in 2030 one of the best 40 country Okay, the report 2021 come out last week, and Oman was 84, which is go back from 80. So the question is, now the innovation under the umbrella of the Ministry of Higher Education, does the minister know that there's how much to achieve to reach that the rank 40 in 10 years? I give another example. The United Nations Sustainable Development Plan 2030, they have, they put really 243 indicators. For each goal, there is more than one indicator. Like for education, there is 43 indicators. So the people who implement, they know they should achieve this indicator. So the question is there is indicators for these 20 detailed indicators, not like the rank in the international report. And it should be details indicator for each goal. And that should be clear for the people, for the minister, undersecretary, for every people who work. And then in the end, did we achieve this indicator? If yes, it's great. If no, why? So how we could achieve it? Maybe we do better than what we put. So this is my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, as I said earlier, Tanfeed, if you look at the Tanfeed document, it came up with some KPIs. Okay. Now, I have not gone back for the purpose of this presentation to see what was achieved or not, but I would expect Tanfeed would highlight what has been achieved, KPIs or not. That's number one. Number two, I think Vision 2040, once the roadmap is being documented by various ministries, they would have an indicator and a KPIs. Without that, there is no way you can measure it. That's the ground reality. Yeah? So, there are indicators, you need to set it up. I would say when you do an indicator, it should be very detailed indicator, not a very general overall that I want to have a debt of so many %. I would go down to the level, so to the extent that if I am an officer in the Ministry of Commerce and I approve, X number of companies, a day, that should be my KPI, that if an application comes, my KPI is that I need to be able to approve all the application within 48 hours. Now, if you don't have a KPI like that, we won't drill down. It will be very, very clear, sort of measurable. Only then the society as a whole will go up. You're from education, I presume. Yeah. The best indicator for education, for me, would be if there is a graduate from Sultan Qaboos University. Okay, he can go and get a job in UK, US, Australia, India, China. That's the best indicator. If a graduate from UK can get a job in Oman, why not a graduate from Oman can get a job elsewhere? If we achieve that level of competency, I think that's the target we should leave at. There's no reason why a talented Omani, after graduating, can go and work anywhere in the world, like other countries do. That is the sort of level we should be looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope I answered,
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Hana. I will move to Mr. Haji Adam. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khalid. Excellent presentation. I have, sorry, Simon? Yeah, I have a couple of comments and a question. You don't need rocket science to understand, what is export and what is import. You very nicely mentioned that, if we want to go forward, then we need to be into manufacturing and export in order to bring money, which I absolutely agree with you. And a lot of us have realized this for maybe 10, 15 years now, that it is very important. We don't want, excuse me, let me put this on. Although we need hospitality staff, salesmen, mechanics, drivers, and truck drivers at Oman, but we don't want all our youth to work in hospitality. We need to move to technology. We need to move to other areas. which you touched upon. When you talk about manufacturing, it means a lot actually. Not only maybe IT or mechanical, but it means a lot of things. And if you go and sit just before the border checkpost, and you just sit there for 12 hours, and you observe how many trucks are entering Oman loaded and how many trucks are leaving Oman empty. That is a clear indication, and this has been happening for years. And I think, I don't know, but I feel it's like a crime. We know it's happening, but nobody was willing to do anything about it. The other thing is, I'm a retired person, and a lot of my retired people, they got their graduates, they have their money, and they want to do something. They don't know what to do. And there is no place where these people can go and they can be directed. Yes, we have these pilot projects, we have these projects. You may invest in this one and you may invest in that one. It's not available here in Oman. There is money, and people are willing to to put their money into a nice project, but they don't know how to do it. The question I want to ask, you mentioned the EDO, removal of EDO expenses. Can I ask if you can throw some light? What was this EDO expenses that it was removed by the government? Was it a big amount?
Okay, thank you, Haji Adam. Good to see you. Let me start off with your first question, EDO. See, what used to happen in the past, there was a separate allocation. PDO is an entity, was set up that it was a company which was producing our exploration for oil, and it would sell it. It has 60%, I think, owned by the government, or maybe percentage change, 40 owned by Shell and others. Okay? So the way it operated, PDO, if you look at the PDO accounts, I think they never showed a revenue. Okay? It only had expenses. And expenses were funded by the shareholders, which is government of Oman, 60%, and others 40%. So in the past, there used to be an amount allocated for PDO expenses. Now that has been taken out. And what used to happen before, that when oil was sold, 60% was to government of Oman and 40% went to Shell and others. So the revenue was out of the books of the PDO. Now the government has created a company called EDO, Energy Development Oman. That company will own PDO. It is the holding company of PDO. So it's not only oil, but it will also have renewable energy like solar and wind, and etc. And what the government is saying is, I want to corporatize PDO properly and let EDO and PDO raise their own finances, fund their own project, and make profit, and then give us the oil. I think that's the big difference which has happened. So it is taken out of the state budget and put it separately. That's why you see the oil revenue is dropped, because it's net of all that. So that is, I hope, that is clear to you. Now, coming back to your first point about import-export, I totally agree with you. We are importing food, for example, food items. Directly some come, but the bulk of it comes via Dubai. Dubai also doesn't grow food. They're importing from India, Pakistan, Iran, China, Africa, everywhere. So everything comes to Dubai. There is a wholesaler or a big importer. So he or she has a margin. Then they in turn supply to Oman. So using the road network, it comes here. That was the system before. Going forward, we need to look at that logistics and change it. Why not bring it directly? We got fantastic ports, Salalah, down south, Sohar up here, Dukum there, and cut that logistic cost and bring it here. So it benefits the Oman economy. So that's number one. Secondly, once it comes here, then you'll see the trucks going this way. If you go to the Hatta border, it will be all full truck going from this side. That's number one. Number two, I would say, why don't we look at each item imported and each item we consume and say, can it not be made in Oman? Can it not be produced in Oman at a competitive price and a cheaper price and a better quality, if not the same? And help our local industry, for that matter. That's what, we need to create wealth here. And the creation of wealth is only will come if we produce and produce and produce. Sitting in an office will not help. That's not. Now, I'll give you two examples, dates and fish. We've got fantastic dates. Why can't we be the top 5 countries in the world in date production and flood the whole market with dates? Why can't we plant 1 billion date trees? I know there's an initiative to plant 1 billion. So, that's one. Fisheries, the world eats fish. We've got a coastline 2,500 kilometers. We're not leveraging our resources. These are the resources. And the final one, you're a retired individual like myself. What do? I think all retired people should add value to the economy, help our young people, because they are the future. Our time invested in young people today will make this country great and big. So there are plenty of opportunities. We can have a separate online discussion and I can guide you to a lot of opportunities, but we need to add. And if you have cash, we invest in business, help the business, but also get involved. Don't be a silent investor. And secondly, if you don't have too much cash to spare, then we give our time and valuable expertise. Time is valuable. We don't value time. I can't put a dollar amount or a real amount to your time in my time. It's valuable. So that time, if you give it back to the businesses and to the societies, people will learn. The youngsters will learn because they don't have to make the same mistake me and you made. That is what I would say.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just one thing I want to add. You will maybe laugh, but I happened to go to a supermarket and buy biryani, and to my surprise, they told me the biryani is late because it comes from Dubai. Can you believe that?
That supermarket, I think you need to tell me. I need to also go and visit and give him some free advice. How can you get a biryani from Dubai? That is not acceptable. And I'm sure you paid a good price.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, you paid a good price. Yeah. So biryani is not rocket science. It's not only related to India, Pakistan, or Iran. Biryanis can be made in Oman. We can make an Omani biryani.
Yes.
With an Omani fusion. Why not? That's
I absolutely agree with you. But I mean, look at the thinking. That even these sorts of things are made in somewhere else and brought here to be sold. And I also came across another investor in Oman selling mattresses manufactured in his country and selling it in Oman. And he's here in Oman as an investor. So what kind of investment is this?
Yeah. And then there are 2 or 3 manufacturing I know. Yeah. So I think, your point is extremely valid. We need to move out of this old thinking of sponsorship or rental economy business and go into a production economy. You see, in the good old days when nobody was coming, we had a sponsor. I was a sponsor. I get some people, he'll bring biryani, sell it, and I get a fee. Those days are gone. We need to produce things here. And not only biryani, I would ask, okay, rice we cannot grow, but some rice we can. We need to look at, instead of using a chicken out of Brazil, why can't we use a chicken out of, Oman, for example? Why can't we use the ghee and the oil which is produced in Oman? Why do we have to import from India? So that is the way to think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bill Hunt, are you with us? If you would like to ask. Mr. Bill? Okay, Mr. Mike, we'll move to you to summarize the session, please.
Thank you, Rehan. Khalid, thank you from all of us in Majlis Al Khonji for an excellent 2-hour session. And thank you to all the participants for the range of questions. This has been a most valuable and a particularly interesting session. I've made 4 pages of notes. I just want to lift out some key points that I have seen. The first is we have sound economic theory supporting Budget 2021. But it's urgent. This 5 years plan that we're working to. We are into month number 2 of the 2021 plan. We have an enormous public debt. It must not be allowed to keep swelling. The money that we earn just to pay interest has no value to us. We have a great country with great infrastructure, great people. And in all of our views, whether we are policymaker, whether we are private sector, listening to Mr. Mohammed Al-Habib, everything is doable. If we have a bit of luck with the oil price up, it makes life easier. But the bottom line, our own initiatives, our own endeavors, our own collaboration, our own working together, we're able to build a second renaissance under a terrific leadership. But we have economic challenges, and Khalid has put those out. And we have people from outside, like Fitch, saying, oh, I think it's going to be slow. I think it's going to be difficult. Actually, I'm stimulated by the words of Mr. Warith when he says, and I know Warith, he's a great man. We have a plan. I'm stimulated by the words of His Excellency Khamis. We will lead to a better performance very soon. You know what I think of Mr. Haji Adam. I have him in great respect. I have the words of Khalid. It's as simple as that. But the words of Madame Hannah are my final words. She said, come on, we're just about into month 2 of budget 2021. Who is asking the questions? What are going to be our successes in this first quarter? When we get to April, just like I go to His Excellency Khalil and say, sir, some good things, some could be better. And this is the focus for quarter 2 and quarter 3 that I would wish to recommend to you and to the leadership. And can I have your support? Who, whether it's policymaker, whether it's ourselves, all fingers point back, remember, but who will talk about the successes of first quarter? What are the new key KPIs? How many new companies were opened? How many jobs were Why can't people come to Oman? How do we align taxes properly so that we are a choice to come here and do business? What feedback from key stakeholders in the private sector? What has Mr. Mohammed Habib got to say? And so from this assessment in April, from who? This is the question. And what are the big tasks to achieve in quarter 2 and quarter 3? And how do we together outperform budget 2021? Khalid, thank you so much from all of us. And for the rest of this beautiful day, enjoy today. And thank you for being part of Majlis Al Khonji, 59th session, can you believe it? And Mr. Khalil, drive carefully. I guess you're in Rusail by now.
We are in Medina Sultan Qaboos. We reached. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all and all the best. Maybe biryani, with Haji Adam identified. But I don't want to go.
Dubai.
Thank you.
Thank you, Khalid.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khalid. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.